Revenge is a dish best served cold. Sometimes horror is a meal best served over multiple courses. In anthology horror films, the audience is treated to a chef's choice of thrills and chills, some bite-sized, others bloody and meaty enough to sink your teeth into. A tantalizing amuse bouche to scare the mouth, a savory appetizer to preview the jump scares to come, a palate cleanser to provide a reprieve from the non-stop terror, or perhaps to lull you into a false sense of satiation. A succulent entree, the main course, a satisfying plating of fears from deep down in your buried subconscious. And lastly, dessert, to tie the evening together, perhaps sweet, but often sour. So this week on Sitting in the Dark from True Story FM, we're looking at the anthology horror film, also known as the omnibus horror film, a package film of shorts, sometimes standalone and other times with grisly connective tissue. I'm your appetizer, Kynan Dias. With me, as always, is our healthy salad option, Kyle Olson.
Delicious.
Our cheese course, Tommy Metz III.
I guess hi.
And our Minon Days, I had to look that up, that's Pete Wright.
I don't know what it is, but I'm really glad to be it.
It's like the little, you like the little mint at the end, the little chocolate, little wrappy thing. Yes.
I've always been thought of as the mint.
Is that the baby wrestled under?
Yeah, exactly. So that's us, and we're looking at our little, package films, omnibus films, anthology films, and we looked at, this week, Creepshow by George A. Romero and Stephen King is the writer, Tales from the Hood by Rusty Cundieff, and Trick or Treat by Michael Dougherty. Yeah, what'd y'all think of this in general as we're looking over sort of the mini genre here?
I was extremely excited when you announced this after the last SITD because anthologies are one of my favorite things, especially horror anthologies. I think it in part because, and I've probably already told this on the podcast, but when I started reading pretty young, but I was too afraid of reading full books. I was convinced that I would forget who it was, who was where. And so my dad had me start reading Skeleton Crew and Night Shift. Probably too early. But so I was reading short fiction for a really long time until I finally graduated, as it were, to Eyes of the Dragon. I have read other books, not just by Stephen King, I promise.
Because it does explain a lot.
Yeah. And so that plus my love growing up, I never had any superhero comics, but I always had scary comics like House of Mystery, House of Secrets, Strange Tales, all those. So all of this is 1,000% my alley. I was very excited.
Yeah, any of the stuff that was comic books that my parents could see on the cover was gory. That was kept out. But then, by the time that I was reading comics, they were super gory on the inside, just not on the cover.
Right.
But did you ever voodoo your dad? Because you just told the story of Creepshow.
Oh, Dad, oh.
My back, my neck.
Yeah, Kyle, what about you? How did this work for you?
I thought this was a great idea because it was almost like we did a short film festival.
Right.
So that was great. I think the short film is highly underrated. As I know that I don't have to convince Tommy that, as he's made several of them. I made one, and one was enough for me. But I love it as an art form, and I feel like it's really dying. Ironically, as everything is moving to short form. So it was nice to sort of see a lot of different ideas and a lot of different things, as opposed to just sort of three like we normally do. So
yeah, I think what's really lovely about these is in particular, and I think what elevates them beyond a short film festival that we just did is that their union in the corpus actually tells something more. And especially in Trick or Treat and Tales from the Hood, you actually get a composite story that is definitely greater than the sum of its component parts. And I thought that was really fascinating. And I had never seen the latter two. I'd seen Creepshow a number of times, but I'd never seen the latter two. And I have to say, I was blown away by what the swings that those movies were taking, and just really thrilled to see them.
Right. I had seen Tales from the Hood, but as a child, and so I did not really understand any of the social commentary for sure, and also had this false memory that it was cheesy. It's obviously like very funny, but I would not call it cheesy at all. It's very, very good.
Yeah.
So do we want to start with Creepshow here, which this was the first time viewing for me? So
oh wow,
yeah. I'm interested to hear what we thought of that. Any axes to grind first?
How did you first, before we get into that, how did you choose these three? Why these three? Unless that's going to be revealed as you go along. Because there's so many even more recent options. I'm not saying better options, just
right, yeah,
VHS line, all of that.
Well, I try to force myself to watch things that I avoid because I'm such a fraidy cat. So again, that creepy show cover is so terrifying.
Yeah,
so scary. So but when I asked around, people were like, well, that's the best of these, right? That's the best of these Creepshow ones. For me, it's like I even have like nightmares about Cat's Eye, the other anthology movie that we could have done. Yeah. I've never seen it. But just the poster enough.
Just the poster
in the blockbuster, and the idea there's a cat or something in the night. Yeah, that's enough. So
we know at least it's got one eye.
One eye out there.
Cat.
Yeah.
Right. So I have to really force myself. So yeah, nothing really except that people were telling me that was the best anthology movie. Yeah. So any axes at all?
Axes, Jordy Verrill.
Yeah.
is rough.
Pretty rough.
And it doesn't get better with age.
No.
It's really Stephen King playing dress up, and it's fine. That would be my axe. Also, I love the story, and so it just bugs me that the story is dealt this blow by having the writer perform it.
Yeah,
that's my principal axe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mine for The Lonely Death of Jordy Verrill is he just plays it so subtle.
No, yeah, it's really hard to track emotionally.
Yeah. He does that Ryan Gosling. Are you even acting?
Yeah.
My only axe to grind, if it even is an axe, is the very first story, not the framing device, but the first story, Father's Day. For me, it doesn't really feel like a full story. It feels like a creature design and then a story sort of wrapped around it, because it's not even a morality tale. Like the bad guy, the father, is legitimately horrible. Ed Harris is legitimately seems like a nice guy, and he's the second one killed. Like there's just a lot of that one's the most scattershot, I feel, and it seems like they're just so excited about the monster that they just want to show it as much as possible. But again, whereas Something to Tide You Over is such a full fleshed out story.
Yes,
which I think is kind of the crown jewel in this for me personally, but we can talk about it.
Yeah, I was surprised thinking of King and reading his book, his memoir on writing, and sort of getting the idea that he has a respect for rural people that I don't have. Watching the death of Jordy Verrill, and then I was like, this is kind of classist in the way that I don't really think of a King that way. So I was really taken by surprise by that. And then in the Adrienne Barbeau episode, where it's like, oh, all these college professors who like, oh, this woman is uneducated is essentially what's going on, and they're trying to get their revenge on her for being uneducated. I don't know if King would do it this way nowadays when you talk to him.
Right. That's a good point.
But yeah, what I really love about this one is all of the comic aesthetics, which comes back in Trick or Treat, which I had forgotten about because Trick or Treat is now its own comic, and they come out with the issues of it. But like, yeah, Creepshow, just having that feeling. Before, I think a lot of other filmmakers were hip to that, right? We think of like Ang Lee and getting torn apart for his version of Hulk with all those split screens and everything. This feels really right to me in a way that doesn't feel like it's taking away from it as a film. It's paying homage to this other art form with while still being a film.
I'm really curious about that comment, Kynan. I don't think I'd ever really thought about that, because you get properties like this one, which feel hand to glove at home with the comic aesthetic.
Right.
You get Ang Lee getting torn apart, but then you turn around, a couple of under 2 decades later, you get She-Hulk, which is an absolute ode to comic aesthetic. And and same thing with Miss Marvel, right? Like those it's like we've come back around, and I don't know if is it because of the sincerity of the auteur director? Is it like, what do we just not take horror. We take horror more as a, this is just what's on the cover, and so that's exactly as seriously as we take it. So nothing surprises us in the actual filmmaking aesthetic. I don't know, but I think it's a really interesting question.
Has anyone ever seen the Warriors alternate cut? Like,
no.
The Warriors come out to play. So in the, I don't know, during the time period, but when DVD was hot, essentially the director went back and said, well, here's what I wanted to do, and actually did the Warriors again, but with comic book transitions.
Oh, really?
They added back in all of that stuff. So every time that it would go to a comic panel, and then it would transition to the comic panel, and then it would come back to life and stuff too. And it was such a tonal shift, because the Warriors, even though it is heightened reality, is still like men, like a group of men trying to kill each other. And when they add in this sort of fantastical element to it, it's like, is this funny now? Because it was sort of like brutal. Like, is it now we're supposed to be like, ha, we're really enjoying these guys attacking each other?
It's desensitizing, right?
Yeah.
Like, it desensitizes. It's the same way, actually, I think the other direction. It would be impossible to exorcise the comic aesthetic from movies like Sin City,
Right.
which are notably motion comic books.
Yes.
Right.
And yet the violence which they are significantly violent, is sort of desensitized through the use of isolated color and pixelated graphics.
Yeah, I really liked this in terms of like having the comic book panel and going into all the, and even back and forth between scenes of like having the stylized bubbles and stuff going in. What really got me though, like, is my main axe this is I really hated the color splash. That, like, whatever, like I'd be into the story, and all of a sudden it's like red, and it's like, we're still doing this. Okay,
yeah, I love that. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that, but that is one of the things I really, really like about it. Yeah.
Are we talking about like when Ted Danson is underwater and the sea starts to glow red and blue?
That was, I was thinking more like, I think it's in the crate.
It's in the crate.
Like,
ton.
Okay. And all of a sudden it's just like everything turned, like the entire room turns green or red or whatever it was. It's like,
and the movie stops for a second to be like,
Right.
are you watching?
Yeah, exactly.
Eyes up here.
Splash page. I get it. But at the same time, like, it just took
I
me
was
right
wondering if
next
part
down
of
the
that was
narrative.
designed, especially for the crate, which is the bloodiest of all of these. They douse the screen in orange and red, and so the blood doesn't look like blood anymore. Is it possible that they were trying to get away with something?
It
Probably not,
because
because it's in other
emotional beats though, because there's a lot of blood like that flies around, but then all over the floor and stuff too.
Right,
So
that's
it's
true.
just-
That's true. That's
It was
true.
just sort of that, like when it like it's the same thing annoys me a lot of movies where it's just like, you're scared because of this note, like that stuff. It's just like, okay, like you don't need to tell me. Yeah, exactly. Like I'll get there. Like if you like, just trust me. Like trust your
let me
audience.
come along at my pace.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, while we're on the crate, maybe we can talk about some of the creature designs, which I think are super good. I mean, this is by Tom Savini, who had worked with George Romero for
Sex Machine
bulk of his life. Yeah. And they called that creature in the crate Fluffy backstage, which I think is a really fun thing to do, right? It is weird. Like, what do you think of this this creature design for Fluffy or whatever that is in the crate?
I think it's such an interesting creature just because it's one of those where they're really, I think, careful to hide it for a long, long time. And then they give us like a Walgreens portrait of it with its smiling, toothy grin. And I think that is another piece of the comic book aesthetic, like really leveraging camera to showcase some incredible design, to the point where I think it's such a dramatic, the number of times we see it, it's seconds, right? It's very, very short. And yet I have a visceral, like, emblazoned memory of the actual image of Fluffy in my brain, because it is unforgettable. I think the way they set up that creature, the way its hands work, the way its face works, it plays for me.
It's incredibly practical.
Yes.
I know that's a weird way to say incredibly, but like it just feels, it's just shy of a person in a suit.
Yes.
So it's as practical as can be without going and becoming cheesy. Like, I believe that it exists.
Right.
Which is rare.
Like, it would be, I might have asked my dad, can we go find the ventriloquist dummy puppet of Fluffy at the time? Like, it felt that kind of thing. Like, if I just stick my hand, there's a stick and it'll turn and pull a little metal thing and open its mouth. Like, it just felt very real.
Yeah, it's interesting how real it feels when it is in an impossible space, like happens in comic books or cartoons, right? Like that crate is too small, logically, literally, for Fluffy to fit in, but it doesn't really matter, right? Like we get that it is larger than it. Or does it like become larger as it comes out of the crate? I don't know, whatever it is, but we get just enough glimpses of it, and for me, I pulled up screenshots of it afterwards. I was like, oh, I think I'm wrong, but I remember it smiling, like literally like looking happy while it's eating people, and not quite. It still looks like a beast, but I don't know why I get that feeling from it, like it is a Jack in the Box or a toy.
That's really funny because that's actually the image that I have in my brain that's so precise and must be perfect. It's also smiling. So, oh well, you win some.
Yeah, it feels like it's having a heck of a time.
Yeah. Mostly because this is another interesting thing. Like this story, the crate in particular, and many of the stories, like they're either patriarchy stories, like about questionable men, or revenge stories. And sometimes there's a Venn diagram where it's questionable men in revenge stories, like the crate. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about this idea of this one as a revenge story is the punchline at the end of it is, well, I didn't do anything. Yeah, I didn't do anything either. Let's just keep playing chess. Like they have absolved themselves of all responsibility. And in fact, Hal Holbrook really just cleaned up a mess.
Right? I suppose so. I don't know if you physically take your wife by the shoulders and put her in front of a fire. I don't know.
It depends, Kynan, on the definition of mess, right?
The structure of that whole thing was so strange to me too. Like, I guess we're supposed to not like the wife because I was just like, she's kind of loud, but
right.
Like these people are all stuck up, and like
I
and also
the idea that
Adrienne Barbeau, that we were supposed to like hate her.
Yeah.
It was
right.
It was weird, but then I guess you're supposed to be like more on her side when the guys do it. But he didn't need to work that hard at the start. But I guess they did want to have the gruesome death and then the mopping. Because it makes sense to just like, hey, oh my gosh, I need your help. And then shove, kill, and then he cleans up. But like, there's this whole long extended thing of like, now I'm wiping over here. Now I have the cloth out. And it's like, this is a lot of screen time for cleaning.
Yeah. I also wonder on the crate in particular, I think there are a couple of them that weren't quite sure where to end.
Yeah.
Did you guys need the entire resolution where he dumps the box in the quarry?
No, I really don't. Yeah, I wonder about that because like it seems like it should be that the crate just goes back down into the bottom of the stairs or something.
That's
right?
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the idea is maybe like other people. I guess this would be my revisions for it, is that you like then pan by and you see that multiple times it has been opened. So like other people have done something like this and then put it back.
Yeah.
Because then when they do they dump the crate in, like, good, monster's destroyed. And then there's the whole thing of like it getting out. It was like, okay, the two things we know about this creature are likes to eat people, doesn't want to leave the box.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so easy to critique King because he's so prolific, right?
Yes.
Like, so he writes these things, he doesn't give them much of a second. He doesn't go and rewrite them. He doesn't go like Walter Hill and re-edit the Warriors or something like that. So he just moves on from them. But yeah, I think they would be tighter today. I think, or at least maybe I'm just idolizing King anyways. Well,
he's not. I'm with Tommy. We have a similar origin story for King. Like Eyes of the Dragon was my first one, and I read a ton of his stuff. I love his short stories. But he these days he's not known for his terse narratives.
Well, I think it goes back to the architecture of this particular piece, right? That what to me, what is the most terrifying is one, there's a monster under the stairs, and we, to our own detriment, get close to it. Like, it's not coming out for me. It's only coming out if I go into it. But the second and more perilous like threat is the humans who use it as a tool to destroy. And leaving it on that without, I just didn't need the monster breaking out of the box, even though I'm sure from a comic aesthetic, having the eyes underwater just to that panel is really lovely, but it's not the scariest thing at the end of that vignette for me.
Right. Well, I think that Creepshow is uneven, which is part of the part of, I guess, the charm of the anthology film and just what you're getting when you go into this is you kind of start comparing and contrasting as you're watching the piece and being like, oh, I like the previous one better. I don't know, but you can't help but that. Especially when you get ones where there's multiple directors or or multiple writers, and so even here where it's King and Romero throughout, you're still kind of comparing and contrasting. But probably Something That Tied You Over is probably the best piece of all three of these. It was really, really stunning. I wonder, for you all who know the piece, like, what was it like? What did you think about Something That Tied You Over, and then as you're revisiting it?
This was one I watched this with my parents, and they multiple times had to cover up. They had a sheet that they would put up in front. And so when the water was coming in, and he goes, "Oh my God," they covered it, so I couldn't see it. And I think that started my fear of drowning. It's so much worse. It's so much worse because I didn't know what was happening, but then I did see them later. And so no, that whole predicament reminds me a lot of The Vanishing. The idea of I've done something to someone you love. The only way you can see what they went through is you have to go through the same thing. But that desperate need to know, that itch that you have to scratch, even though it's so scary, that's a really provocative situation to be put in.
Right.
And I thought this one was really, really well acted. I really like a lot of this quite a bit.
I think, for me, it was the first time and may still be the only time I've seen Leslie Nielsen do something straight. And he's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Well, that's how he got those parts, is because he was so serious.
Yes,
so they started casting him in Airplane. Yeah,
he can really hold a straight face
and hold his breath,
hold his breath for a very long time. The other piece is, what a delight to see him and Ted Danson doing something like this. Like, it was fun to see Ted Danson. So I feel like this one, of all of them, like you said, it is the sort of a peak of Creepshow as a movie. It is the tightest of the stories. It is the one that actually gives me a resolution without dragging on in a way that feels like we're taking a side story. And it leaves enough sort of the horror to know that there's, now we've introduced 2 sea monsters into the world. That's great. Like, there's just enough lingering there that feels, scary. We've created lore.
Right. It's interesting, right? Because sometimes with short films, you feel compelled to hurry up. And one of the reasons why this one does feel the tightest is because we've taken our time in some ways at the very beginning of this, and we don't like start on the beach or something. We see Ted Danson like in his falling asleep on the couch, and just what that means to that character as opposed to somebody who wakes up in bed or something. Like he seems like this guy who is this Lothario who might have done this multiple times before. Does he care about Leslie Nielsen's wife? Maybe. Is he in love with her? I don't know. And then there's this just fascinating thing where Leslie Nielsen comes in to kind of taunt him, and he's just like, again, wasting time. If we were like less confident filmmakers, fiddling with Ted Danson's TV and go, oh, your TV is out of order. The cables are loose. I can't imagine that you didn't notice the picture quality change here. And like, that's so fascinating. And you could do the entire like tide you over bit, burying Ted Danson in the sand without adding this component of he's a millionaire who just loves his VCRs and he loves his cameras. But there's something about that just makes this feel more complete, right? Like we've taken the time to make him a character as opposed to just rich guy and poor guy.
Well, it goes back to our invasion horror conversation, which was, so it was mostly about taking a space that is safe and violating it somehow. And this movie takes a space that not only is presumed safe as a home, but has been altered to be a fortress and a well-protected, high visibility kind of a bunker. And it is still violated. And I think that's the thing. That's the next level fear that is more than just the revenge of a dark man.
Right, like Poe in the 80s.
Yeah.
Casper Amontillado, but
Yeah.
what could we do to protect from me getting Amontillado? Well, I'll put cameras everywhere. And
I'll put cameras everywhere.
Doesn't help, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went into this thinking I had seen Creepshow, and then I think a lot of it is just because so many of the pieces have permeated pop culture so much that, you know, like Stephen King covered with The Grass and all that kind of stuff. And even Father's Day seemed vaguely familiar to me. And then we got to this one, and like after about 10 minutes or so, I was like, the hair on my arms going up, like, this is like really good. And like I have no idea where this is going. And yeah, this is the genius and the frustration of George Romero. It's like he can do this, but then he also does Father's Day, and you go, really? Like
Right.
it's so amazing that like sometimes you can just tap into something, and it's such fantastic filmmaking. Other times it's just like, I don't know, guy comes out, kills a bunch of people, whatever.
Right. What order does he kill them in? Whatever.
How about we do it one at a time, really slowly? Just keep sending them out. And like, God bless, Ed Harris is one of my favorite actors, but it's like it's fun to watch someone doing the absolute worst performance of their career. Like, he's gonna be so amazing in the future, and just watching him just like shaking on the dance floor, like, oh man, everybody's got to pay their dues.
It was like his sort of finale, the picture wrap on Ed Harris is a delightful sort of homage to the weight of the part crushing him, right? Like, there's just, what else could you do?
It's so slow too. Like, it does like what, 4 times it moves. He's like, oh man, oh geez, gosh, I hope that don't fall on me.
Exactly. Why aren't you moving?
Move, sit up, do something.
Yeah.
Well, the last section we haven't talked about is called "They're Creeping Up on You" with E.G. Marshall, sort of as this Howard Hughes one. That, you know, that's the thing with the anthology one. Like sometimes they feel like they're of a piece. This one feels separate. I don't know if in a bad way, but I guess when you're looking at it all together, it's like, well, how is this related to some of the other ones, even
why
thematically?
Does it last?
Why does it last is a very good question. Yeah, but I think this is a really interesting way of doing like the Howard Hughes story and like visualizing it with cockroaches and him constantly throwing away these cockroaches and them overtaking him. But yeah, any thoughts on that? We don't have to spend a lot of time on it.
I would like to spend just as long as we need to get Tom's reaction to it, because he's famously is a real fan of insects, and I'm curious how he does with this one.
I still have not watched most of this.
I'm with you on it too. Once I figured out what's going on, I was just like,
I listened to it. Yeah. Like whenever the bugs would show up, I'd turn away. I listened to it and all the bizarre, I get what's going on, conversations between him and the guy outside. I got all the class warfare, the bugs are poor people, the bugs are immigrants, whatever it is, I totally get it. But once the bugs came out, I haven't seen a lick of it. And then I looked up and saw him do that one thing when he's like, hello. And I was like, right. That's right. And then, so I just didn't. I can't watch.
You and me both.
It's interesting that it is of all of them, I think it's the straight across the bow morality tale. Like, it's just, here's a bad person, bad to everyone, thinks everyone is worse and under him, and he dies. And in that respect, like, it's a really cool final effects piece, practical effects piece. It's really cool. And also it's sort of the least interesting of them. And because it's the most like simple. I get it. I knew what was going to happen. Bugs are gross, and so I get it. So if you have an issue with cockroaches, you're going to have an issue with this one. And for the rest of us, you know, who am I kidding? Well, me too. It's gross. It's awful. But I just don't have the, like, I didn't get the multi-layered fear of, you know, tide you over.
So what do we think about the frame structure here? You know, this is with young Joe Hill, Stephen King's son, who's now a horror writer in his own right. So at the beginning, we have him and his father fighting over whether he gets to keep the Creepshow comic or not. And then at the end, we have the garbage collectors, one played by Tom Savini, who finds it and says, oh gosh, we can't order this voodoo doll out of here because someone has already ordered it. Yeah. So what do you think of this one?
Well, to lead off a horror movie with child abuse right in the first 5 minutes, bold choice. Like, wow. They're like, they sort of set you up. Like, I mean, the hand mark on his face, it was like,
that was good.
Man.
That thing lingered.
Yeah.
Which was also there before the first slap, if you notice. If you go back and watch it, right, because they cut it like here, and the hand's here, and it's already all red. This is obviously not either take one or whatever. But yeah,
Are we sure Joe Hill just doesn't have a birthmark or something in the shape of a father's hand?
Yeah.
That would be the worst prank on a guy whose origin name was Joe King. Come on.
What I liked about it is this, and Trick or Treat in particular does something where, and I think part of it is for when I saw this when I was young, it makes it feel extra unsafe because there are kids in the beginning. There are lines that are drawn in movies and kids are fine, and this kid is not fine. And Joe Hill, like for instance, ends up writing some of the kids are not fines, like the black phone and stuff. And some of the scariest parts of the black phone have nothing to do with the grabber. They have to do with his horrible school life and his horrible home life with his abusive father. The idea that like this kind of violence was just out there. We just weren't talking about it yet. And so that made it feel extra unsafe. Like we're peeking behind a curtain that we don't usually peek behind. And then to have the kid, to have that horrible father, that's what fathers are for. Gross beer. That's what fathers are for. To have him writhe around at the end is pretty dope.
Yeah, then we go from child abuse to patricide. Like that framing device is diabolical. I think the other thing that it gets to is, we talk about like that, does horror in movies make for horrible people who do horrible things to each other? And I'm sure we've talked about that on this show in some years past. But the whole idea that this movie or this framing device is centering on the real thing that creates violence in people, which is a violent home life, not violent media. And that is the scariest part, right? Like that is the thing that I'll bet people watching this could see themselves in most clearly, when the rest of these things are fantastical and supernatural and dark humor and monstrous and whatever, but this one hits home. And this is the first thing we're met with in the movie. I think that's genius.
I hadn't thought about it that way because I got the idea of like, this is how we're watching people get their revenge, and then we're seeing little Billy become one of these people. That hadn't occurred to me. That of course is there, right? If you know, like the history of like censorship in comics, like in the movies, when they started to censor movies with the production code, the Hays Code, mostly what they were warning people about was the sex and like the gangster type violence. It wasn't horror. But in the comics code, when the comics code is created, it's pretty explicitly because of horror comics that people are like, the children, we got to think of the children, because of things like Creepshow is aping. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not really the comics. Don't worry about the comics. They're just where you get the voodoo dolls from.
Right, exactly. Where you get your equipment.
The comics, you're actually arming the victims with comics. That's what's happening right now.
Ah, yes.
I believe the father in Father's Day in the flashbacks that's the original publisher of Creepshow, right?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
is that true?
That's his cameo. Yeah.
Oh wow, and he's a real SOB in that stuff. Yeah. Oh wow, I didn't realize that. That's super cool.
Probably the fourth or fifth time I've seen this movie, and it's the first time that I saw there is a connector.
Yeah.
Between, did you see the ashtrays?
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. I didn't see them in all of them because I didn't start looking but it's the ashtray, Pete, that she kills her father with
in the first one,
in I Want My Cake. And then it's the same ashtray that is in Leslie Nielsen's apartment.
I did not see that.
It is the same ashtray after in the crate when he knocks out his buddy. And he's leaving a note for his wife. Yeah. And then finally, it's the soap dish in We Are Creeping Up on You.
Oh my goodness.
It's the same one.
I had no idea.
I've never, and I don't know if it's in the other ones or in the wraparound.
Yeah.
But I've never noticed it until this time because it's such a weird ashtray. It just stood out.
I didn't notice it in the death of Jordy Verrill either. So I'd have to look for that. Right.
It's probably covered in grass.
Yeah. but you're right. That is something really important. Like this one, as opposed to Trick or Treat, these comic panels that they have in Creepshow are really textually dense. So like if you're putting this on a movie screen, in the 80s before a lot of people had VCRs or anything, like you would know it's there, and you knew it was all real. You got enough of a read to like, oh, that's a real paragraph, but you wouldn't expect that you would go and actually find it some other time, right?
Right.
Yeah, like so nowadays we're so used to that, right? Like this multimedia, like transmedia stuff, where we're like, oh, I'm going to go back and look at that later. I can't wait to get that on DVD or pirate a copy so I can read the rest of that.
Yeah.
It is in Jordy Verrill. It's at the Department of Meteors. It's on the. It's next to the cash box.
Okay.
Next to the cash box on the desk behind the scientist.
Are you watching the movie? How do
Oh,
you know
he's just
that?
fastest
Oh, if
Googler
people-
in the
I
world.
just,
people, like,
scrubbed
written
through
this?
it at 90x. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
No, but exactly, that's the kind of thing that we do today. But they're doing this just for themselves, I guess. Like in the 80s, who are they trying to impress with this? There isn't a Creepshow Wikia back then,
But I love that stuff. It's almost like
Mm-hmm.
there's this one, like a haunted object that was the use of such horrible violence that somehow then just keeps getting passed down, which is interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a really cool horror comic anthology out right now called The Silver Coin. And in it, someone gets a silver coin, and then it's kind of monkey paws, like they get a wish that turns horrific every time.
Oh, that's cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, looking now at Tales from the Hood by Rusty Cundieff, he writes this with Darren Scott, who's also the producer, and then it is through Spike Lee's 40 Acres and a Mule. And wow, I was really surprised how deep this movie was and how it really goes places. I guess one of the things I'm interested in horror for is like what we can explore in terms of like social issues or like real fears, but in a safe space. And this is exactly that. Like, this is exactly like, let's talk about, my God, slavery, reparations, the drug trade, the
Child
crack
abuse
epidemic,
again.
child abuse again, and
Police
dirty
brutality.
police.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really doing it. So what did we all think of Tales from the Hood?
Axes to grind. I like the
Yeah.
idea of this movie more than I like the movie itself.
Oh,
just
yeah.
because it's not terribly well made. Like, it's not terribly well filmed. It's not edited correctly. Reaction shots don't match. Like, it's kind of slapdash. But once I realized that, and it's pretty clear from like the first two segments of like, oh, this is this. I don't know if it was run and gun or what. Like, the sets don't look like actual houses. Everything's in a soundstage. But once you get over that and you enjoy it for the commentary and the idea of making an abusive father actually a monster is really interesting, and there's some exciting things to be found in it. And whatever Clarence Williams III is doing.
Oh, I loved him. Loved him
He's
so much.
amazing. But I mean,
Amazing.
you have to be ready for it.
Yeah.
He does not help you meet him. You meet him where he is.
Well,
Yeah,
I had an opposite view of it, I guess, because I had just seen Rusty Cundiff's previous movie called Fear of a Black Hat, which is this like a Spinal Tap parody of in the hip hop world, and so I was like, oh, this is incredibly well made.
Oh,
So compared to Fear, you
I
mean?
guess so. I
Yeah.
guess that's where I'm coming from. But I was like, whoa, I love what they're doing here, cinematography wise, and the look of it. So yeah, I had a completely different view of it.
Okay.
I think the strangest piece of the I mean, this was a first time watch for me, and I was blown away at what they were able to make scary. Which is why it was hard to wrap my head around, because I expected more of the supernatural. It didn't help that I did all three of these as a triple feature last night, and so it was. I have the bends this morning, and but the issue I think of going from scary monster to police brutality to gang shooting, back to scary monster is I think notable. The scariest stuff, like just talking about the vignette with the the child abuser,
David Allen Greer.
David Allen Greer.
right. He is much more scary when he's not a monster, right? Like, as a horror movie, they capitalized on the scariest things for the lives of these people in a way that I think elevate it beyond a horror anthology. Like, this movie is saying more than any of the other movies are saying. And I think that's really cool. I think it's really cool. I don't know if any of the others do anything like that, but this one hit me.
Yeah, I guess my main next thing is that it absolutely falls apart at the end. like, I mean, it's, as much as it's like going along, the last story is the worst story, and the final vignette thing is so terrible that it's like, oh, like I really wanted to, like, even though, going along, I'm like, this is pretty bad, but it's still kind of, I like that they're aiming, they're aiming for the back wall. But like by the time you get to the end, it's like, oh. Sort of left
you're talking about the You're in Hell reveal.
Like that. The last story I thought was the weakest of all the stories.
The medical experiment one.
Yeah, with the strobe light and stuff too, and then going into like You're in Hell stuff. So I was like, oh.
Well, the last one is the hardest to watch with that strobe light. I'll give you that one. That is difficult.
This is before we had epilepsy warnings.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. It feels like we have a winner of an idea of a movie that's really nailing the social commentary, but wrapping it in a horror movie bouquet to make it appealing to a lot of different audiences. And then we're just like, oh, also it's a cartoon. Like where I agree, it falls apart at the end. And I don't think the boys seeing themselves in their own coffins has as much weight as any of the other bits from any of the other vignettes.
Well, again, I think the presence of Clarence Williams III at the beginning and end just cures all of the movie's ills for me. I thought that was so good. So I'm not used to seeing him in that. Normally he's a cool cat on television, or then in some of his movies he's like the stalwart, like noble Sidney Poitier light of like there's nothing wrong with this guy and he's upstanding and he's just someone that like white people can like because he's like this upstanding black guy, right? But in this one he is having a ball. And
so he knows that he's doing crazy.
Yes.
Yes.
I just want to make sure
he understood the assignment.
Okay.
Because the acting of this movie is all over the map.
All over the place.
He is so consistent all the way through.
Yeah, he's doing Looney Tunes stuff, and that really, really works for me. Well, within the first section, the first segment, it's this piece about the young rookie cop, the one black cop on the force, it looks like, right, who is forced to choose between doing the right thing and working with these corrupt police officers. So what do we think of that segment in general?
That's the one that felt the most like a Spike Lee joint to me.
Yeah.
It captured significantly the fear. I think, like, I felt the fear of the black cop working with white cops, right? That was very real, and that was the horror story. Much less so than the bring him to me kind of final fight.
I do appreciate those. So they take them to that grave and they're like, I'm gonna piss on this dead councilman's grave, and then that we get like the carry hand come up and grab that cop by his junk. That was very satisfying to me.
Yeah. I also like sort of the rug pulled out of it too, of like whoop, he's down, and then it just covers it right back up again.
Yeah, that was good.
Right, if the grave had burped.
Right.
I licked its
not have
lip
been out of place.
Yeah. So for the rest of you, are you with Pete? Like it doesn't feel like it needs the horror elements and some of these, or
I loved the graffiti stuff. I thought that was great. I wish I would have like leaned more into that side of it, because it was sort of like when it came, I was like, oh, that's a really good idea that you didn't really exploit all the way.
Right.
And then also the makeup on our killer was so bad. Like when he comes back, it's like, oh, they just put a couple appliances on his cheeks and one on his forehead. Okay. And now he's the idea of, I think even I remember something from like Luke Cage of like, I'm their worst nightmare. I'm a black man who can't be killed. Like that idea. Oh, wow. That's some really powerful stuff that they could really do of like, these guys can't stop it. And I do like the almost the It Follows casualness of wherever they go. There he is again. And he's like almost making them do this to themselves as opposed to doing it. And then sometimes he's not. So that's the part of the tonal shift. But like I was saying, I like that they swung for the fences. Like the first one out, like the first thing out is like, okay, we're doing police brutality right away. And I'm like, okay.
We're doing Rodney King, right? We're doing Rodney King
100%.
Within a couple of years of Rodney
really
King,
fresh when it came out.
So I mean, I guess like Spike Lee can lean into that, right? Like it's kind of a black a Klansman spoiler, that Black Klansman is really about Charlottesville. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then that might not make any sense to you. but besides Spike Lee, I don't know a lot of other like genre filmmakers who are willing to go there like immediately after something like this. So I super appreciated it. Yeah.
I also thought it was
someone
interesting.
even say, "Can't we all just get along?"
He does as a joke. Oh no, that's Corbin Burnson later.
Oh, that's later.
Corbin Burnson.
That's a later one.
Yeah.
About his house. I thought it was interesting that the African American cop was not let off the hook at the end. He's not killed, but he's driven insane. It's a little on the nose of where were you when I needed you? Like I didn't need it to be spelled out that much, but still to not let him off the hook is important. That's what a lot of this movie is about, is pointing fingers at times back at the Black community and saying, the oppressors that we blame everything on are not always the problem. We're doing a lot of this stuff to ourselves.
Right.
Especially in that last, the one with the strobe light Magoo. Yeah. That seems like the message of that is how many people have you killed through that? So not to say that white people don't deserve a little bit of blame.
Oh, you think somewhere in there?
Corbin Burnson is coming. Don't worry.
Yeah. No, we're the absolute worst. But I like that that it wants to attack all of those things.
Yeah. So again, let's talk about Corbin Burnson. Then let's skip ahead a little bit because that is also a super interesting character. Like he's David Duke essentially running for governor of Louisiana, but they do very little to change that. Like they're not hiding that very well, right? Or they don't want to. Like his first name is Duke.
Klansman.
His first name is Duke, not his last name, right? But yeah, this is super an idea I hadn't really thought of before. Like sure, creepy dolls, but pairing that up with some of the original like art of enslaved people who lived there, and then they're slowly coming out of the picture somehow, and now you have to look for one or two of them. Cool. That's super interesting. Yeah.
I think what's important about that to me, like what that reads to me, that that the history of suffering is still very much alive. This painting is a living representation of suffering and the hammer of karmic retribution. And that to me, again, I think we've used the word heavy-handed like 15 times, but it's a touch heavy-handed, but also like, insofar as the movie veers into the didactic, it does so because people haven't been taught yet, right? They haven't been taught this perspective yet. So it's okay to dip a toe into the didactic and be heavy-handed so that we're teaching, because we need to see this perspective. And it was a different perspective than we were seeing certainly in these other anthologies, but in film, I think it's a powerful message, and I could not wait for Burnson to get eaten by puppets. Could not wait. I wanted him to be more Home Alone than he was.
Yeah, that piece is really interesting because we start, and Corbin Burnson is the star, and we spend a lot of time on him. But then we introduce this character played by Roger Guenveur Smith, who we know from like Do the Right Thing. He plays Smiley, and that. So it's like, oh, and this is our way into this now. He's like this black young political aide who is selling his soul to the devil, right? And we're like, okay, that's what this piece is about. No, it's not actually. And then we get rid of him. And then we're like, oh gosh, we're like chasing for point of view. We're chasing for an audience surrogate. Like, oh, I guess we're stuck with Duke, right? We're stuck with Corbin Burnson here,
which is so like that again screams Spike Lee's influence. Like first, we're going to go back to that perspective we just talked about, which is we have a black character who's the first to go because why? Because he's a sellout, right? Because he's and he deserves some of the blame for what is happening right now, for trying to clean Duke's reputation. And then the rest of the house comes alive in a delightful way.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Like you're talking about, oh, it's a story that has to be told. I think that people now, like including myself in this, are open to this idea of like, what it means to deal with reparations and like
Mm-hmm.
living in a house that used to be a slave quarters,
Right.
and I just can't imagine what that was like in 1995 to see this and how it must have gone over a lot of people's heads, or just not wanting to admit what it's really about, or admitting that it has good points, I guess.
Mhm.
Like, hey,
Well, I think
yeah.
this is the kind of aesthetic that made Spike Lee a friend to everyone, wasn't it?
That's so funny. Boots Riley, the filmmaker now. It's so funny watching him give Spike Lee grief. And people are like, who is this guy to like give Spike Lee grief, and just remembering how Spike Lee was 30 years ago.
I think I'm a puppet nerd, so the puppet design is great. Like, I think the actual figure itself. I don't think the horror stuff really works because just having it laying around place wasn't really very scary. So it's just like, oh, there it is laying on the ground. There it is laying on the stairs. Like, but then when you finally get the full stop motion animation and you see all the puppets together and
All
stuff
of them.
too, that worked. It's just like a lot in between of like Corbin Burnson just wiggling a doll. Oh no! I mean,
savagely.
Oh
no! Thinking about the David Allen Greer one, where with the little boy who is being abused by the monster who lives at home, and going to see at school his teacher Rusty Cundieff, who can't quite get him to admit what's going on, or actually the boy is admitting what's going on. And
that is Rusty. That's the director.
Yeah, he plays the
Playing that
teacher
role?
here. Yes.
okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's him.
Checks
I
out.
think it's really interesting the sort of powers the boy has to fight this monster that reminds us of things like voodoo, but it doesn't call it voodoo or hoodoo or one of the Caribbean African religions, but it's kind of like that enough that we kind of get the rules, but not so much that we're getting like too specific, I guess, or like bogged down in that.
I wonder how in fashion and in vogue that idea of write your fear down and light it on fire, or write your fear down and rip it up, that may have been really big, because I know that that's swept, and then to literalize it, to have it literally become like a totem that can cause hurt in the actual world, might be enough to sort of sell that entire idea.
Well, and I know they're not that's not the only culture to celebrate. I mean, I was introduced to it through Asian culture. Like,
really?
It's that having that sort of rice flash paper, you write dreams and wishes and things, and you light it and it goes poof and flashes away. And that I did not know that it was a part of African American culture either.
I just meant therapy culture, because he
Oh,
talks
yeah.
about he talks
for
about
sure.
learning that from someone that he talks to. So
Yeah. And as a teacher, education saves everybody.
Right. Yeah. And that's where the director puts himself, as in the mind of the teacher. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
There's
But
a reason he didn't cast himself as the father.
So weird.
It's so interesting seeing, like, you're talking about Leslie Nielsen as the bad guy in Creepshow, like David Allen Greer, who I've heard talk about. He's like, no, I was a seriously trained actor, and then when I got on In Living Color, that was a departure for me. But yeah, seeing him have the chops to do that and be incredibly terrifying. I don't know how to unsee him as a comedian or see him as Dag, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's exceptional. I thought he just had a really dark energy on screen, which is so novel.
And it had the least amount of sort of horror elements, or at least the special effects one too, but it really works. And maybe the cleanest smashing of a person. Like, they crumple him up, he's on the floor, and he's just sort of mangled there. There's no blood, there's no bones, there's nothing.
He's a puddle man.
Yeah, exactly.
But this gets to why it was such a, like, why I didn't see it coming, because my brain did not want to acknowledge that this wasn't a monster horror story. And that was a lovely kind of narrative surprise, even though I recognize in hindsight, I should have seen it coming all along. I didn't know if the teacher was going to pull a, Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of a thing. And now we're all going to go after the monster as the Scoobies. But the fact that it was a child abuse kind of rescue was so dark and so satisfying and so surprising. I was legit surprised when we got there.
Yeah,
Which is
and the
great.
fact that it ends with he's just like, well, you know what you have to do now is burn him alive.
Yeah.
Like, whoa,
come on, kid, why don't you do the honors? Now turn your head and watch before it goes away.
That's right. Don't look away.
Well, and then the last section here is one called Hardcore Convert, and this is the one that I think you've already said, like, it is the hardest to watch for sure. It is the most didactic. It's the most in your face about things. It's also sci-fi, right? So both Creepshow and Hardcore Convert end with sci-fi. I think it's like, why? Like, do something, But I was thinking about that as I was watching it. Like, no, this isn't the one you should be ending it on. But by the time they do get to the ending, which is this great montage. I know we disagree on this, but I loved it. I rewatched that montage afterwards. I thought it was so incredibly catching. But that's where we end the piece, the piece overall. So
I was surprised. I didn't see that occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge
coming.
I didn't see that coming of we're going back. Because this movie was grounded in the insaneness of Clarence Williams III. I was willing to go along with this weird experiment with the spinning table and insanity is real because this movie's crazy.
Right.
And so I didn't see that coming, which was pleasant. I like that.
Yeah, it's obviously Clockwork Orange.
Right.
It's like, we have, that's a very clear thing, but it's once again, we have this really strong ideas and these really a pretty well written kind of stuff too. And the worst visuals to go along with it. That is just so distracting that you're sort of missing a lot of the points that they're making just because it's so jarring and the way they do it. Plus a weird bondage thing going on. What was that about? Like, I get that the dehumanization and stripping him down and stuff too, but then like the nurses are walking around in black leather. It was just
I didn't mind it.
This. Well, that's the thing. It's like, but it
for both sides. Like, I was okay with
it. like where did you hire these people? Like, is this their uniform? Like they show up for work? And tonally, it was just a strange thing. But what you got, Pete?
I felt like the production design choices in this one were the greatest sort of throwback, like the aesthetic style. It felt like Frankenstein, early Frankenstein. It was the most sort of B movie, but it was also what was the Woody Allen Sex but Afraid to Ask?
Everything you always want.
Everything you want to know about sex but we're afraid to ask. Like it was it felt like we're going into the lab that's actually in the testes in that movie, and like we're making these wackadoo things larger than life and sort of nonsensical. And then to Kyle's point, to go into that montage, which I think I'm on board with the montage. All the bondage stuff felt like a weird gateway to get to the thing that mattered. And what I haven't resolved in my head is, are they of equal or are they of sort of stair-stepped kind of building intensity to get me to that montage? And I find myself a little bit too distracted by the contraption that they built, which was very much a first thought, best thought kind of a discussion, I think, to the montage, which was the impact of the entire thing.
Gotcha. Right. You've got to take this guy who is this serial killer, I guess we don't call it that when it's gun violence in this country. I mean, he's a serial killer and he goes out and shoots, and we have to strip him down to his bare essentials and then reprogram him before we can get that music video montage idea. But yeah, how we get there, I will grant you, perhaps there are some things we could have done better. But
well, right, because they make like a vaudeville show out of it, right? It's so attached to its contraption that it's distracting from exactly what you just said, which is the weight of the fact that he's a serial killer, right? And especially when this builds off of the first segment's police brutality, like that was incredibly strong, and this just felt like it didn't earn the montage to me. I'll probably soften on it, but again, first watch, like this, I really enjoyed this movie. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Any other thoughts about Tales from the Hood?
I feel like there was an alternate cut. And there's something because there's something that doesn't quite match up here, that I think that they were going one way, and I think the You're in Hell thing, it was a swerve, because at one point when they're going after in the very first segment, he like rips off the clothes off of the chest of the thing, and he has like a green bubbling liquid in his chest. And I was like, and we see that later on in the mortuary. I thought this was going to be like, oh, he's like the Dr. Frankenstein or Dr. Jekyll or whatever you want, who's like doing this stuff, like empowering people to take revenge or doing all this stuff behind the scenes. But it never goes anywhere. It never can expect anything.
Yeah, that's
I wonder if
interesting.
there was a version where he was like a puppet master who was like putting these things into motion instead of just being the devil.
That reminds me, in Creepshow, right? We get this creep character from the comics who's in the opening, but I don't recall him.
Wave.
Yeah, he's like, "Hey, everybody, it's me from the comics.
I'm
How
on the
you all doing?"
Right.
Yeah, and we could have used him for a character who, like Clarence Williams, is between the segments, or even at the end. I don't remember him being there at the last segment unless I missed him. But yeah, so Clarence Williams' character potentially could be doing that, but yeah, it turns out he's the devil. So yeah. The devil doesn't have to explain himself to us.
Right. Yeah.
A flickering candle in a darkened room. 3 stories. 3 glimpses into the abyss. A forgotten dollhouse sits on the attic floor. Its tiny inhabitants, porcelain faces frozen in silent screams, seem to watch her every move. But when the music box winds down, they'll move too. Lost in the fog-choked cliffs, the old lighthouse beckons. Its beam, once a beacon of hope, now pulses with a sinister crimson glow. He can hear the whispers in the wind, calling his name, drawing him closer to the edge. And on a static-laced radio wave, a child's voice pleads for silence. "Don't tell anyone what you saw," it hisses. "They're listening. They'll find you." 3 tales of horror. 1 chilling journey into the heart of fear.
Oh, for crying out loud, that's not what this is. Life is no anthology movie. You're just looking for a place where you can listen to smart people talk about good movies, and sometimes bad ones. That's why you need to head over to truestory.fm/join and join the community supporting all of the shows of the Next Real family of film podcasts, including Sitting in the Dark. Get bonus episodes and content, early access, a standing invitation to join the live stream chats when we record, ad-free versions of our shows, and access to the super secret channels in our Discord community. Mostly, you'll know you're supporting our shows and the team that keeps them coming every week, just as we've been doing since 2011. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
Meanwhile, what's happening on Halloween?
Yeah, why don't we look at Trick or Treat, which is one that I had seen before as a grown-up and therefore remembered properly. So yeah, this is by Michael Dowery in his directorial debut, and this one takes a little bit different tack in that, yes, we have 4 different tales of horror that are announced in the title sequence, but they interact a little bit, and we're doing it non-chronologically, so we'll talk about that in a second. But are there any axes to grind on Trick or Treat?
I wish Sam would never have taken his helmet off.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Agree.
That is my one axe. Yeah,
That's it. I think that's it.
But then other than that, I thought this movie it's definitely the most nimble of all of them.
Yeah.
And the interweaving really works. That could really muddle the process. I'm sorry, other axes. I feel like everyone just agreed with the Sam.
Yeah,
no, that's exactly.
I've got some points to make, but I'm saying.
Yeah, I think Sam is such a great design, and then him with the burlap sack off is less. I don't know if I would say it's less scary. I would still be terrified of this baby skull pumpkin guy, but it's just less
almost
interesting.
Alienish.
Yeah,
like it's leaning a little bit more towards a gray for me a little bit, and it just becomes less interesting. I don't get it.
Right. Yeah. With the sack on, he could be anything.
Exactly.
So answering that question, I've always felt the same way. That's really good to hear.
It's kind of adorable because he's just always sort of sitting there, just being like, "What you doing, everybody?"
Yeah, because he's the arbiter of Halloween regulation. Like he's the HOA. Like he just needs to make sure your Halloween is okay. Yeah. And I kind of love that. Like almost the entire movie is about Halloween law, like that which you must do and must not.
Right.
It's kind of perfect.
So what do you all think of the intersection, the non-chronological aspect of it? I don't know if Creepshow would benefit from that or Tales from the Hood, but that's what we're doing here, and like playing with the form of anthology.
Nimble was the word I used. That's the best
Mhm.
word that I can come up with. It
Mhm.
seems like it would run the risk of muddling it, or you would lose interest in certain ones. But I thought it was really elegantly done. Whenever we would jump to another scene and then jump back, I felt energized. Not, wait, what's happening at that other one? I was like, oh, right. And what's going on with these people? And then I'm a huge sucker for everybody coming back Magnolia style, like all on one street at the very end. Like that's such a simple trick. And each time I'm like, it's moving at you.
I had the same reaction. Whenever the thing they would walk by in the background, I would be like, oh, instead of,
yeah.
You know, like it was like, oh, okay,
Right.
all right, I see what you're doing. I
Yeah,
like it.
he was right there the whole time.
Right.
Foreshadowing of Brian. I'm sorry,
Brian Cox.
Brian Cox
Mhm.
knocking at the window and then being and it's just sort of like the movie's like, we'll get there in a little bit.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I really love that stuff.
I could feel myself being annoyed with all of that in another movie, and I'm
Yeah.
not here. Just really well done. Yeah, that first time you see Brian Cox there, I'm like, I could see myself, even if I was in a slightly worse mood or something, being like, oh, like they're telling us how clever they are.
Yeah.
But here it is clever. So all of those totally paid off for me. One of the things I had forgotten was that the bad guy in the Anna Paquin story turns out to be Dylan Baker, which I had forgotten. I was like, oh, even a second viewing, I was surprised by that. And again, not like, oh, come on, that wasn't set up. How do you explain that? Like instead being like, wow, that's super cool and interesting, and it makes perfect sense.
Okay, I want to talk about that a little bit too. Okay, so I know we're going to get into all the other individual pieces, but like his night is wild to me, and I'm having a little trouble like putting this all together. So like,
okay,
this is
so much for movie magic, Kyle.
Yeah, I know. It's like it's the same. It's some of the same gripes I have. You know, like it's just like when they try and take a character's origin and pack it into like a very busy day, like. Everything it was established from them, like it was happening then. So he's a high school principal who apparently is a devotee of Halloween, like the old traditions, and he kidnaps a child on his own front porch and takes him inside and murders him. And apparently he's done this before because there's a test there. And he also is then killing that kid, and then he's teaching his son.
Yeah, he's a groomer.
To his traditions, right? He's teaching his son like to chop off people's heads and make them into pumpkins.
It's not grooming if it's your own son. It's called honor.
As a man who's like at the same age as he was in this one, that'd be enough for one night. But no.
But hold on. So you missed the spot. So he buries him out in the yard while he's still alive.
Yes,
and then somehow also cuts his head off out there and not inside the house. Now that we're just picking at things, yes.
Goes and carves a child's head, with his own child, and then gets dressed up in a costume, puts on vampire teeth, and goes out and meets women, and
kills one of them,
kill one of them, and just leaves her on the street,
in the parade,
and then goes out for more, and then goes to a party where he is then eaten by a werewolf. Did I cover?
What is the problem, Kyle?
Because he called out the party like to his son.
Yeah, he said, "I have a date."
Yeah. So
which was the one that he killed and then put on the bench. Like, man, that's a guy who knows. That's a high school principal. Time management.
And 5 years out of 7, Halloween would land on a school day. So
yeah.
Boy, Tuesday is going to be tough.
It does make sense because you can't. I would have been fine to end his story with just him and his son after a pretty good fake out. Part of me was like, oh my God, is he really going to kill the cutest kid in the entire world?
Yeah.
No, it's just Fatso again. There is morality. In this one, unlike some of the creep shows and stuff. I guess just Father's Day, and so you have to seal up his story with that weird caveat of his sociopath son is just sitting on the front stoop handing out
potentially come home
potentially deadly candy.
Right.
Yeah.
Dressed like him. Dressed like his dad. Yeah.
Dressed like his dad. He might be handing out poisonous candy. We don't know. But
yeah. So the werewolf party. So I
Okay, you've already
couldn't
put on
help.
Vampire Law and Werewolf Party. Already two fantastic television show pitches. But go on.
Excellent. So this is another one which is kind of a fake out. We get the four attractive young women, and they're putting on all their costumes, and they're all going to be, they're sort of notoriously hot Disney women,
Right.
in the animation, and I think only one of them. Well, they all
Were they
end up
Disney
being
woman,
victimized.
or were they more like Grimm's?
Well, you're right. They're
Well,
Grimm's. They're
well,
Grimm's, 'cause there's
Loki-
Red Riding Hood.
No, Snow White
no.
and Cinderella are the Disney. Like if it's a blue Cinderella
Okay,
and
so
a
it's
blue
both.
and yellow
Yeah.
Snow
My
White, it's
apologies.
definitely Disney. Yeah.
They go to this party, and this is the thing I want to talk about, which is the act of the bacchanal when they all start ripping their clothes off. They go. It's a 2-stage ripping. The first ripping is the heteronormative sex party, which is let's just get the breasts out and flash the camera at them a lot, and then they pull off their skin and reveal the fur underneath.
Right.
I am curious, as someone who I know has watched probably fewer horror stories than some of you, the connection between titillation and terror, right? Titillation and horror. Because we see it sometimes. Isn't this kind of the final girl trope, right? All the other girls die because they're having sex. Is there something that we have to, I really mean this, to where we strategizing the way we put, the way we put sexuality on screen, particularly heteronormative sexuality on screen historically, right before we pull the rug and just start killing people?
The second undressing, the undressing down to the fur, made the first undressing less of a drag for me. When they started doing that, I was like, oh, this is supposed to be female empowerment, but instead they're just making them eye candy. This is a drag. And especially there's just one scene of nudity.
Yes.
The rest is just like this. And I was like, what are you doing, movie? You didn't need to do this. And then when they keep going, I was like, oh,
I get
this
it.
is actually worth it. And I get it. And it's cool. But maybe that first part of the undressing could have been cut down in half to get to if the idea was to, you think we're doing this, but we're actually doing this. You did the first this for a very long time. And someone in the marketing department said, we have a trailer to make. And so make sure to have a lot of B-roll.
That sort of gets my question. I feel like what you just described is a more modern take on what we're trying to do. But I'm thinking about more the emotional roller coaster that you're putting somebody on to say, hey, we're going to sex it up a little bit, and we want you to feel a certain way before we make you feel horrible, because feeling up here is going to make feeling down here that much more of an experience.
I think one of the connections traditionally is sex and death are sometimes put on the same level because they are us at our most animalistic.
Yeah.
It's where we are potentially at the least amount able to control ourselves, that we are lowering ourselves to either base desires or the fact that we are animals made of meat and we will have to die. Yeah. And so those are put on the same category, potentially.
It also gets into the whole Wolfman thing of it too. I mean, like the wolf, traditionally Wolfman stories are about people losing control. It's about like, I think Dana Gould had a big thing about how the Wolfman is alcoholism. Like you go out, something wild happened to you. You
don't
wake
remember
up,
it.
You're covered in stuff, and you have no idea what happened. It's about losing control and stuff too.
And then it turned out you just won the big high school basketball game.
Right? Yeah, exactly. But even like this little freak out savage moments too. But so in this one we have that same thing. It's that women, having that same thing, except they're very much in control. So like when the wolf comes out, it's sort of like they have taken all their prey to a specific place as opposed to trying to hunt them down. It's like they have lured them into using their particular power. And then use it to that. And I thought the stripping, and then it continues on. I thought, that's really clever.
That was clever.
Well, I don't know how film professory you want me to be on this show sometimes.
Please get film professory, Kynan.
But there is a film theorist named Linda Williams who writes some really influential pieces on genre in general, and her piece is called Film Bodies, Gender, Genre, and Excess, and she talks about 3 genres that attack the body in different ways, and those are pornography, horror, and melodrama. And so she places horror kind of at the Venn diagram between pornography and melodrama. And so her ideas here are like, pornography is about sadism, melodrama is about masochism, and then horror is about sadomasochism and what you're doing to the audience. And she pretty much invents the idea, or coins the idea, that what's going on in horror is the castration fear in men. That the knife that's getting after you is someone else's penis who is taking away your penis, right when you are most penile.
It's a real sword fight, so to speak.
Yeah. So whether it's like, it tends to work when the villain is male or when the villain is female. Like the villain is there to castrate you, and she's I don't believe
Freud
she. Yeah. I don't believe she's the one who coins the term final girl, but her work was hugely influential on whoever did do that.
Final girl was Men, Women, and Chainsaws. Or
yeah.
The author of that.
But her point is that might be one of the reasons why we have final girls is and there are virgins is because they are immune to the threat of sexual castration.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as we're talking about this, I mean, this Trick or Treat may be the horniest horror movie I've ever seen. I mean, not in terms like there's other ones that might have more sex or that kind of stuff too, but like consistently, like tonally, like it get like as much as you'll veer into one thing, they'll like bring it right back. Like it is a thirsty movie.
Well, because even the principal, like you can tell he's getting hot while doing the work that he's doing, and I think that plays into what we're talking about. Like, and putting these two things on the same level, thirst for everything.
I don't know. Dylan Baker in Happiness? Is that something that you all have seen? Yeah,
very much so.
He just cursed with this look, right? He looks like a pedophile.
Well, the kid's name is Billy in that movie too, which was weird. It's Billy in both, so the whole time I was like, ugh. But he's amazing in Happiness.
Dr. Maplewood, you're so cool. That's what Billy says. Yeah. But Dylan Baker just has sort of this face, right? He just like is perfect for that. It's interesting to see that he's leaned into that as his career choice and be like, well, this is how people are going to cast me. I'll make a career out of it. Yeah.
I would like to work.
He also has like administrative power. He was really good in 13 Days, the Cuban Missile Crisis movie, with Kevin Costner.
There's
really
so few like great character actors like this now. Yeah. I'm so glad. Like even this movie has like I would say 3 of them, and like it's really nice to see the sort of like those kind of people get a chance to do something, even though all of them are slumming. But it was still like fun to see Brian Cox just like you hire Brian Cox, you get a Brian Cox performance, and by God he gives it.
Go all of it, every bite.
Yeah. That piece is really genuinely scary. Like there are some horror bits that are fun, or we have Schadenfreude or that kind of thing. Like him, even though he's such an unlikable character, once he's alone in that house with Sam, it's horrifying, like actually terrifying. And then, I don't know. I don't laugh at it. Like maybe I should, because there are clever things in it, like that Sam is killing with Halloween candy, and those types of reveals.
The glass.
But, the razor blade in the candy. Yeah. And so I should laugh, but instead I'm just terrified of it. It's just a horrifying situation. And Cox, who I guess we normally think of as like being so strong, right? And then to see him so vulnerable is really unsettling.
Well, there's a through line in all 3 movies at risk of trying to make a point that isn't really there, of someone very powerful or big in stature being taken down by something very little. And that also comes from one of the first TV, Tales of Terror, I think it was called, in when she is Karen Black. Karen Black is brought down by a fetish doll, like chasing her around the house. In the first one, in Creepshow, obviously, I guess you would say it's the bugs. In the other one, Corbin Burnson. And then in this one, it's Brian Cox by the much smaller Sam. That seems to just be this other, it's always presented in different ways. That is a very subconscious fear happening for different reasons, but for all of these filmmakers, of either if it's just, even though you can clearly outweigh them, they can still win either by the amount of them or by their cleverness, or the idea of just being like taken down a peg by those that you have done wrong. I don't know. the fact that it's in all three of these just seems like it means something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the last one that we haven't touched on yet is the Halloween School Bus Massacre, which also involves Brian Cox's character here. What do we think of this? Of the, I guess, cool kids? They're not that cool to me, but I guess cooler than Rhonda. Taking her down there and to this quarry and telling her about this town legend of the Halloween School Bus Massacre.
The legend itself is pretty bleak. I mean,
That's dope. Yes.
I mean, like, wow, they really went for it. I was like, this is uncomfortable. Like, this is really bad. But then they marry that with some of the weakest of all their storytelling of like, okay, these kids, their whole thing was like, we're going to get this one kid out. We're going to spend, I don't know, days setting up this elaborate thing to scare one kid.
Yeah, I didn't get the plan.
Yeah.
Which then messed up the morality, which then made it seem like whatever her name is, my apologies, is overly mean to them by leaving them to their death. Like that one I didn't get.
Yeah.
You guys are all stuck on the plan. I couldn't get past the fact that they had keys to the old rusty elevator.
You didn't have those in your town, Pete?
Oh, nowadays you just go to Old Rusty Home Depot.
Old Rusty Home Depot,
right?
Yeah, I agree with it, and that's why this is the curse of intermittent reinforcement. That some of it is just bland, and I can't stop to think about it, or it's dumb. And then some of it, like when they're down in the quarry doing their thing, there's some legit like threat, and it looks kind of scary, and the bus keeps coming back and having it stick up. The production design of the bus is a legitimately frightening totem if you're in the space of that child. And so, there's some good stuff going on there. It's just how they get there that's like, come on. It was not clear.
Yeah, the legend is really interesting and bleak, as you're saying. I like the atmosphere and the tone of that quarry, but it is the one that I just didn't remember compared to the other ones, which were very vivid as I rewatched this.
Yeah, the legend is too much. It's too good, and everything that comes after is just like you took an idiot, by your words, idiot savant out to scare them in a quarry. Nice prank. That's how you want to spend your Halloween.
Yeah, you and your two friends really got her.
Yeah.
The three of you.
Yeah.
And, remember the time we did that thing?
Like, if you accept it as a morality tale, it's satisfying justice that she gets to come up on the elevator. Like that's what needed to happen. And I needed the children to be murdered in the quarry. Weird.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a Tuesday morning as they discovered that there's like a dozen killed men out in the field, 4 children in the quarry.
Crucified.
They'll never find that quarry.
yeah. It's all on this one one street. How do we do this? Yeah.
And this is the thing, though. Is there? Would you say because they do an able job of tying everything back up, especially they say earlier and then later. Can you pinpoint an event that sets it off, or are they really completely we're just looking at the synchronicity of events on Halloween?
Well, it is, the movie does end at the same time as it begins, right? So we see them, Sam crossing over to go and kill Leslie Bibb now for blowing out the candle. But I guess that's it. Is there something else I'm missing besides that?
I guess maybe not. I'm just trying to think through this happened because this happened, or this happened and then this happened and also this happened?
I think it's the second one.
Yeah, I do too.
I think the inciting incident is Halloween.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we get a little news report about Warren Valley, Ohio, and all
Weird
that, but it doesn't say anything like, it's not Haddonfield or something. It doesn't have like a history. It's not like this wasn't built in ancient Indian burial ground or anything like that. Just like, this place likes Halloween, I guess. So but that nonlinear trick, right, of picking up at the end right at the beginning, it makes it feel so complete. It's just trickery.
Yeah, it does. It makes it feel like impossible. It's a Mobius strip of a story, and also perfect.
Wait, that's the title. Trick or treat. Oh, I just got that.
Wait,
Damn it.
and that's what you
Damn it,
do on
Kyle.
Halloween. Like the guy that doesn't even get that far.
Oh,
Wait, Halloween, that's that day in October.
Wait a minute. Those deaths were murders.
Oh, no.
That's scary. I get it now. All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed looking at, I guess, 12 or 13 little stories here for our Anthology Horror Month. And,
did you have any others that you didn't include in? There's been a lot of these.
Well, again, it was Cat's Eye, and I was like, well, I don't want to do 2 Stephen Kings and things like that. Yeah, but I guess I'll take a look at some other ones. Oh, well, you know, I worked on one that is not out yet, so if you can look out for our movie, which is the Haunted History Tour, and the idea of that, my friends have worked with this Haunted History Tour company in New Orleans, and they're like, hey, can we do a little anthology movie, you know, kind of mirror the way the tour works. You go to all these haunted little places, so none of them are like based on like actual things from the tour, but that's the general idea. So I wrote one of those, and it's called the Haunted History Tour, and that'll come out sometime.
I took one of those
eventually,
and so I am in your target demographic.
Yeah. I'm too scared for that. I can write a movie about the Haunted History Tour.
I'm never gonna go
go on the Haunted History Tour. Oh my goodness, no.
Well, I can tell you, if you go on one in Savannah, you're going to hear a lot about the Midnight of Garden of Good and Evil.
Oh yeah.
That's what they wanted to talk about more than anything else. It was like, but haunted? Like, yes, but over there, Kevin Spacey shot a scene. I was like, okay, I'm
haunted by the box office.
I'm in a hearse. I'm literally in a hearse. And we're talking about Kevin Spacey, which is scary in its own way. Did you gents have other horror anthology movies that you have seen that you are particular fans of?
Any of the VHS ones has at least 1 to 2 that are good. ABC's of Death has some of the worst and some of the most breathtakingly good segments. Again, it's A through Z, so they're so short.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's some really beautiful stuff in those. The ones that they made of Nightmares and Dreamscapes, I think that AMC made or something, it was unfortunately terrible, I thought, except for the William Hurt one about Battlefield. Speaking of, again, where all the little people, the little soldiers, green soldiers, come to life and start killing him. Again, little versus big. Yeah. That's a really cool segment. Pete?
I'll go back to Cat's Eye only because there's the one where the cat is sucking the breath of the child. That's scary as crap.
Well, it's not the cat, it's the little. They're worried. That
the little
gremlin
gnome. Yeah, right. And the cat actually was the hero, right? The cat. Right. See, that shows how long ago I saw it. That it was everything's been supplanted by cat. Thanks, Kynan.
The old lore about cats was they would steal a baby's breath, and what that meant is they would just fall asleep on top of a baby because the baby was warm. And so he put that, but no, Cat's Eye has The Ledge, starring James Woods.
Yes.
James Woods. I'm sorry, smoking.
The smoking one. Yep.
Quitters Incorporated,
Inc.
Which is incredible, starring Alan King, and then The Ledge, which is the guy from Airplane, the lead,
Robert Stack.
Robert Stack.
Okay, yeah, Robert Stack plays The Ledge. It's really, really good. It's fun.
Yeah. I think Creepshow 2 obviously has the horrible lake goo. I hate that so much. I can't.
The Wrath.
Like to think about it.
Stop thinking about it.
Stop talking about it. Nope, we're not going to do it.
Love it.
Cat's Eye. I think I've seen so few of these, but the other one would be the I think Double X, which was just all female directed anthology with horror stories, which is interesting. And the rest I haven't gotten to. There are a lot.
There are a lot, and it's also there is an amazing amount of filmmakers that don't think that you have, even though it's short, that you have to tell a whole story.
Yes.
That it's just sort of like this little sketch and you're like, oh, okay, it's weird. I don't know. There's a different, or they think that it's just time for this one big visual.
Right.
That's the important part, not the story. When it's the story.
Or one good death. And you're
one
just
good death.
The whole thing.
But instead it's the something to tide you over. It's the whole package that makes a short so important. So.
Has anybody seen Body Bags 93? It's curious to me because it's John Carpenter and Tobe Hooper. Which I think is anyway, cut this. Oh wait, I'm editing it. I'll cut this. Which allows us to transition to coming attractions.
Ooh,
Kyle. What are we doing?
All right. So I have the 3 films that were all released within a very close succession of each other. And because of the time they were released, they did not get a lot of attention or press and stuff too. But they all are sort of linked thematically. Because while we have done a lot of silliness, we played a lot of games, we have not played the most dangerous game. So my 3 films are from 2019, Get Duked. From 2020, Run, Sweetheart, Run. And also from 2020, The Hunt. Yes, we are hunting people in the next segment.
Love it. I've watched one of those, and I think you made up the first 2.
So that's what I'm saying. These are movies that did not, because of the time they came out, just did not get a lot of press. They sort of came and went because other things were going on.
The Hunt was the last movie I saw in the theaters.
In the theater.
Before the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was the very last one. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. Wait.
That's outstanding.
Juked and Duked? What are they again?
It's called Get Duked. Duked.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Sweetheart,
It's going to be like a horror comedic
version.
version of the one that we watched with the guys who were wandering in the woods.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that by way of Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, the ritual. The ritual. Yeah.
I thought you were going to recommend The Pest with John Leguizamo and Jeffrey Jones.
I looked up the whole list of all the most dangerous game adaptations. I had forgotten all about The Pest. That's what the plot of it was.
You never forget The Pest.
I saw it in movie theaters, but I forgot that it was the most dangerous game adaptation.
Well, that is an outstanding list. I can't wait to.
Will you put that up on the
Discord?
I will put that on the Discord. You bet. I want everybody to watch these movies. This has been really great. Kynan, as always, thank you so much.
Wonderful
for your
job.
tutelage.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, outstanding work. And thank you, as always, Kyle and Tommy, for joining me in being taught.
Yep.
And thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to the show. We sure appreciate your time and your attention. On behalf of all of these yahoos, we'll join you next month when we will be sitting in the dark.